biting wind was the first thing that truly registered, even before the snow. It had been an ambitious idea, even for me, a seasoned solo camper who usually sought the quiet solitude of the wilderness. My usual haunts were the milder trails of the Appalachians, or the dry, crisp air of the desert southwest. But Lake Superior in February, during what promised to be a significant blizzard, was a different beast entirely. I'd chosen a remote spot on the Michigan shore, a small sheltered cove I had scouted the previous autumn, hoping for unparalleled tranquility and the stark, almost alien beauty of the truly frozen world. I craved the challenge, the absolute silence that only deep winter can offer, a silence so profound it hums. I arrived late in the afternoon, the sky already bruised purple and gray, heavy with unspoken promise, the air crisp and still then, held a premonition of the upcoming storm. A subtle shift in pressure, a deepening chill that seeped into the bones despite my layers. My pack felt heavier than usual, laden with extra fuel for the stove, a more robust four-season tent designed to withstand gale-force winds, and enough dehydrated meats to last a week, just in case the roads became impassable. Setting up camp was a race against the fading light and the encroaching bone-numbing cold. The snow started as a gentle dusting, almost pretty, swirling around the tall, skeletal pines and the gnarled birches that clung stubbornly to the rocky shoreline. By the time my tent was pinched, my thick-down sleeping bag unrolled, and a small hissing stove was boiling water for coffee. The flakes were coming down thicker, faster, each one a tiny frozen star. Night fell with a vengeance. The wind, which had been a whisper, became a guttural howl, tearing through the ancient pines and rattling the tent fabric like a tapered, desperate bird. I huddled inside, the warmth of my coffee a small, fleeting comfort against the pervasive, insidious chill that seemed to penetrate even the thickest wool. The forecast had warned of heavy snow, but this was more. This was a whiteout, a true blizzard, the kind that swallows the world whole, erasing all landmarks, all sense of direction. I could hear the branches groaning under the weight of the accumulating snow and ice, the sharp, crackling snap of ice-laden barrows giving away under the strain, echoing like gunshots in the vast emptiness. It was magnificent, in a terrifying sort of way, a raw display of nature indifferent in power that made me feel insignificantly small and vulnerable. I spent the first few hours reading my headlamp, a familiar weight of a well-worn paperback of grounding presence, tethered to the sane world beyond the canvas walls. The words blurred occasionally as my eyes darted to the tent fabric, listening, but as the night deepened, an insidious unease began to settle in, creeping into the corners of my mind. It wasn't just the storm. I was used to storms, had weathered many in years of solitary wandering. It was something else, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the soundscape. The wind still raged, a constant deafening roar, but beneath it, or perhaps woven into the very fabric, was a new sound, a faint, almost impeccable scratching, like brittle fingernails dragging across the frozen bark, or perhaps something even more unsettling, like bone to bone. I told myself it was just the trees, the ice, the natural symphony of the winter forest settling into the frigid slumber. I tried to rationalize it, to force my mind back into the comforting narrative of my book, but it persisted, irregular, something closer, something fading into the background, almost just at the edge of audibility, a phantom sound that pricked up all of my nerves. I pulled my sleeping bag tighter around me, trying to dismiss it as an overactive imagination fueled by isolation and the sheer, untamed wilderness of the night. My heart, however, began to beat a little faster, a nervous drum against my ribs. Around midnight, the scratching stopped. A sudden absence of the sound was almost more unsettling than its presence. I lay there, rigid, listening to the recklessness shriek of the wind, my heart thudding a little harder than it should have. The frantic bird trapped in a cage. Then, a new sound, one that froze my blood to its veins and sent a jolt of pure terror through my body. A guttural, wet snuffling right outside my tent. It was too close and very distinct. It wasn't a bear. They were deep in hibernation, their dens sealed against the wintry fury. It wasn't a wolf. Their movements were more fluid, their breathing less ragged, less heavy. This was something heavy, something that moved with an unnatural stiffness, its weight pressuring down the fresh snow just beyond the thin nylon of my tent wall. I could feel its presence, a cold predatory awareness radiating through the fabric, a sense of being observed, hunted. The air inside the tent seemed to grow colder, charged with an unseen malevolence. I reached for my axe, which I always kept within arm's reach for emergencies. My hand trembled violently, not from the cold, but from the primal bone-deep fear that resonated with something ancient within me. I held my breath, straining every nerve to overhear the incessant roar of the blizzard. The snuffling continued, punctured by a low, almost mournful whine, a sound that was both pitiable and utterly horrifying. It sounded hungry, not just for food, but for something deeper, something vital. Then, a shadow fell across the tent wall, impossibly tall, impossibly gaunt, stretching and distorting in the swirly snow. It moved, a fleeting, distorted silhouette against the swirl white, a nightmarish creature of a haunting human form. My breath hitched, caught in my throat. It was standing on two legs. The sheer height of it, the unnatural thickness, sent a wave of nausea through me. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my face into the cold nylon of my sleeping bag, trying desperately to rationalize. A deer standing on its hind legs to reach a branch? A trick of the light. The snow. My fear playing cruel games in my mind. But no deer was that tall, and that thin, that wrong. The shape was too distinct, too humanoid, yet utterly alien. The scratching resumed higher up the tent wall now, near the peak, directly above my head. It sounded like something was trying to tear its way in. Systematically, patiently, I could hear the fabric strain. The faint, sickening, ripping sound of a seam giving away. A tiny tear appearing, letting in a sliver of the frigid air. Panic, cold and sharp, as a shard of ice, lanced through me, overriding my reason. "Go away!" I croaked, my voice in panic, readily whispering against the deafening storm, a desperate plea to an unknown horror. Scratching stopped for a moment. There was only the relentless, furious wind, a brief, agonizing pause that stretched into an eternity. Then, a sound I would carry to my grave, etched into the very fabric of my being. A scream. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something archaic. Something that tore through the night and echoed into my very marrow of my bones, vibrating through the frozen ground beneath me. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated agony and ravenous, bottomless hunger, a sound that spoke of a soul twisted beyond recognition, forever bound to monstrous craving. It was high-pitched, piercing, yet with an underlying guttural, raspy quality that made my stomach churn and bile rise in my throat. It sounded like a deer, yes, but a deer that had witnessed unspeakable horrors. A deer whose spirit was consumed and corrupted by something unspeakably evil. The sound seemed to suck all the warmth from the air, leaving behind only an arctic void. I scrambled, fumbling beyond my phone, knowing that there was no signal, no hope for connection. But with an instinct I reached out to call for help, to confirm my existence was overwhelming. My fingers numb with cold and terror, slipping uselessly on my smooth screen. I curled into a ball, pulling the sleeping bag over my head, as if the thin layer could even protect me from the malevolence outside. The scream ended abruptly, as if cut short by an invisible blade, or as if the creature had simply run out of breath, its lungs collapsing under the strain of such an unnatural sound. Then silence. A silence more terrifying than the scream itself, broke only by the relentless, mocking shriek of the blizzard, which now seemed to carry a triumphant note. I lay there, rigid for what felt like hours, my body a block of ice, my mind a chaotic storm of fear and disbelief. Every rustle of the tent fabric became a lurking figure, every gust of wind a whisper of its return. a promise of its insatiable hunger. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe too loudly, convinced that any sound would betray my presence. My body just laid there still, but my mind raced, conjuring images of old legends, from the chilling stories whispered around campfires in hushed tones, stories that were always dismissed as mere folklore, as the frantic tales of a child scare. The Wendigo, the spirit of insatiable hunger, born from cannibalism in the cruelest winter, a creature of ice and starvation. Now it felt terrifyingly real. As the first faint hint of dawn began to gray the sky, a pale anemic light filtering through the still falling snow. The wind started to die down, its fury abating into a mournful sight. The snow, though still falling, was lighter, softer, almost gentle now. I forced myself to sit up, my muscles screaming in protest, stiff and aching from hours of frozen terror. Peeking through the tiny rip in the tent fabric, the one the creature had made, I saw it. Footprints. Not deer tracks, not wolf tracks, not even the prints of a large dog. They were impossibly narrow. Narrow prints like a human foot, but elongated, with unnaturally sharp claw-like toes digging deep into the fresh powder. They led from the tree line directly to my tent, circled around it once, a chilling, deliberate survey, and then vanished, back into the swirling snow, heading deeper into the impenetrable woods. And then a few yards away, practically obscured by a fresh drift, something else. A patch of dark, matted fur, frozen stiff, and a single splintered bone, too large, too thick to be the form of any local animal I knew, bleached white against the pristine snow. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold ran down my spine. I didn't pack up. I'd even bothered to roll my sleeping bag or dismantle the tent. The thought of lingering or touching anything, of being in that place any longer, was unbearable. I just stumbled out of the tent, my axe still clutched in my hand, a useless weapon against such a thing, and I began to walk. I walked until my legs burned, until my lungs ached with the effort of breathing in the frigid air, until the trees thinned and I saw the faint, blessed outline of the snow-covered road. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached my truck, its windows caked with snow and ice, and fumbled with the frozen lock, my fingers clumsy and unresponsive. Starting the engine was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. A rough mechanical purr of life and escape. The drive out of the woods was slow, treacherous, an unplowed road with white ribbon of uncertainty. But I didn't care. I just needed to be away. Away from the silence, away from the cold, away from that memory of the scream, away from the lingering scent of something ancient and hungry. I haven't been back to the Great Lakes in the winter since. The thought alone sends chills through me that no amount of warmth can dispel. And now, when the wind howls at night, especially when the snow falls thick and fast, I still hear that sound, a primal echo of hunger that walks on two legs. Somewhere in the deep, frozen woods, I know what I saw, or rather what I felt, what I heard, sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and the world outside is cold. I wonder if it's still out there, waiting for the next lone camper, for the next blizzard, for the next taste of fear. It was supposed to be a break from everything. 5 of us, me, Liam, Sarah, Chloe, and Mark, had planned this trip for months. A week deep into Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, a place we'd been going since college. No cell service, just lakes, trees, and the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. We're all seasoned campers, love the outdoors. This wasn't some rookie mistake in the backcountry. This was our sanctuary. We put in the Seagull Lake in late July. The air was thick and humid, buzzing with mosquitoes, but the sun was bright and the water, when we finally dipped our paddles, was cool and clear. The first few days were pure bliss. We paddled from dawn till dusk, made our way through root-tangled trails, and found a perfect campsite on a small, unnamed island in the middle of the sprawling lake. It was classic Boundary Waters, towering pines, granite, outcrop, and water so still it perfectly mirrored the sky. We swam, fished, told stories around the campfire, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. The nights were warm, filled with the chirping of crickets and the distant call of loons. It felt like paradise. The shift started subtle. Around the fourth day, Liam, always the most attuned of nature, was the first to notice, "It's too quiet," he said, one evening when we were washing dishes by the lake. Listen. We did. The crickets, which had been constant chorus, were gone. The frogs, usually croaking from the marshy edges, were silent. Even the mosquitoes seemed less aggressive. It wasn't a natural hush, like the forest was holding its breath. We shrugged it off as a temporary lull, maybe a change in the weather. That night things got weirder. We were all asleep when a sound ripped through the stillness. Not a human scream, not an animal cry. It was high-pitched, drawn-out wail, like something unimaginably painful, but with an underlying guttural resonance that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. It seemed to come across the lake, echoing off the granite cliffs. We all bolted straight up in our tents. "What the hell was that?" Mark whispered from his tent, his voice tight with fear. "Bear?" Chloe offered, but it didn't sound like any bear we'd ever heard. It faded after a few moments, leaving behind an oppressive silence. No one slept very well after that. The next morning, the mood was different. The easy camperance was replaced by a nervous tension. We tried to shake it off, went for a long hike. That's when we found the deer. It was lying in a small clearing, practically obscured by ferns. Its eyes were wide, glazed over. But what truly disturbed us was the way that was torn apart. Not like a wolf kill or a bear. The flesh was stripped clean from the bones in places, almost surgically, but with a savage, raged edge, and there was a distinct, sickly, sweet smell in the air, like something rotten but also metallic. "Coyote?" Sarah ventured, but her voice lacked conviction. We'd seen plenty of coyote kills, and this wasn't it. This was different, more deliberate, more disturbing. Back at camp, we tried to act normal, but the incident hung over us. Liam started talking about the old Ojibwe legends about the Wendigo. We scoffed, of course. Wendigos are winter creatures born to starvation and cannibalism from the frozen north. This was summer, lush and green. But his words, even dismissed, planted a sense of unease. That night, the sound started earlier. Faint rustling in the undergrowth, just beyond the firelight. A twig snapping, closer than it should have been. We kept the fire blazing high, throwing on more wood than was necessary. Liam swore he heard something mimicking Chloe's laugh, a distorted, hollow sound that made her jump. We tried to convince ourselves it was just the wind, or our imaginations playing tricks, but the air grew heavy, still despite the heat. The insects were gone again, leaving an unnatural void. Around 2 a.m., the snuffling started. It was low, wet, and unmistakably close. It moved around the perimeter of our camp, circling us. By then, we're all awake, huddled together around the dying embers of the fire, clutching our knives, as useless as they felt. The sniffing was interrupted by the sound of a long nail scratching something. "It's just an animal," Mark kept repeating, but his voice was strained and whispering. His eyes were wide with terror and filled with water. Then a shadow fell across the tents closest to the tree line. Liam's tent. It was tall. Very tall. And gaunt. And it moved with a jerky and natural gait. The moonlight filtered through the dense canopy and cast a distorted silhouette against it. It was standing on 2 legs. My breath caught in my throat. It was too thin, too elongated to be a bear, and too tall to be a human. And the way it moved, a sense of quick, almost spidery shifts, made my stomach clench. We could hear it breathing now, ragged and wheezing sound like lungs filled with dust and decay. The sickly, sweet, metallic smell intensified, making us gag. "Oh God!" Sarah whimpered, burying her face in Liam's shoulder. The scratching sound intensified. Right on Liam's tent, near the top, we could hear the fabric straining. Then a faint tearing sound. It was trying to get in. Liam let out a strangled cry, scrambling to grab his axe. "Get out! Get out!" I screamed, my voice raw, crackling in the humid night air. The scratching stopped. The silence that followed was abrupt, deafening, broken only by my own racked breathing. Then, from distinctly above Liam's tent, a sound that ripped through the night like a physical force. It was the scream from the previous night, but amplified, closer, and far more horrifying. It was a high-pitched shriek, like a deer being torn apart, but with a deep, resonant, guttural quality that vibrated through the ground and into our bones. It was the sound of pure terror, an agony that spoke to the soul twisted beyond recognition. It wasn't just loud, it felt like it was inside of our heads, tearing at our sanity. It was the sound of something unnatural, something that should not exist. We didn't wait. We scrambled, half blind with panic, grabbing whatever we could. Mark was already tearing down his tent, his hand shaking so violently that he could barely unclip the poles. We abandoned everything else, the food, the extra gear, even our fishing rods. Our only thought was to get off that island, get away. To paddle across the lake into the pre-dawn gloom was a blur of frantic strokes and silent terror. Every splash, every rustle from the shore made us jump. We didn't speak, we just paddled, our muscles burning, our hearts pounding. We porged out to the lake faster than we ever had, stumbling through the dark, roots catching our feet and unseen eyes of the forest pressing in on us. We reached the point where the sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the darkness we carried into our souls. We threw our canoes onto the car, barely securing them, and drove. We drove for hours, not stopping until we hit the gas station, well outside the wilderness boundaries. No one talked about it on the drive home. Not really. We tried to rationalize it, to find local explanations. A rogue bear, a sick animal, collective hysteria, but deep down we all knew. The way the deer was killed, the unnatural silence, the sounds, the shadows, and that scream, especially that scream. It wasn't an animal, it was something else. We don't camp in the boundary waters anymore. We don't even talk much about that trip. When we do, it's in hushed tones, with averted eyes, sometimes when the wind howls just right. When the summer night is too quiet, I can still hear that scream. And I wonder if it's still out there, lurking in the deep green shadows of the North Woods. Its hunger never satiated, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting campers to stumble into its territory. Hey friends, thanks for sticking around and watching the video. I hope you really enjoyed it. If this is something you'd like to see in the future or more videos like this, please comment down below. I'll be checking all the comments later today. And yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, then I'll do more. You know, just trying to branch out there. It's been a good year since I've really made videos. And this was recorded live as well, so if you guys keep an eye out for my live streams, you know, shout out to everyone here in the live stream that made it out tonight. And that's it. If you're watching this late at night, good night, go to bed. I have playlists with old videos. And yeah, all right, see you.